Justin's gonna think Jason's gonna think we're cheating just because
Okay.
we're sang by the top of our test.
During the break, before I got hijacked, we noticed that there was a PTR, its value equals the empty string. Notice this says attribute value is null. That means that this pointer doesn't have any attributes. So checking to see if its value is null, I did it. Doesn't do anything. Because it's not we're not checking the attribute, we're checking its value. So checking that wasn't the solution to the problem. What we were trying to find is a solution to the problem of it's got bad data in it versus it's empty. How can I tell the difference in a number field? So I'm going to take 2 seconds, maybe a little longer than that, to do a Google. JavaScript number, I don't even know what to search for, field invalid. Can I mark a field invalid from Java data? Validate decimal numbers in JavaScript is numeric. By the way, that's another way to take a look at numbers to see if they're numbers. Is it a number? But then is not a number tells us the same kind of thing. We're usually more interested in that. Invalid selector, handling numeric inputs. I'll do a little more research. It didn't come up quick, so I'll do a little more research, see if I can figure out how to distinguish that. But now that this is a number field, we still get error messages if we leave text in there. Have to refresh. Get an error message saying this isn't a valid value. If I leave it blank, I get the same answer. If I put stuff out of range, I keep that. And now I should be able to submit. Nope. Because at this point now, excuse me, HTML5 is kicking in going, hey, this isn't right. So that's a pretty good blend there of the two, and that can often be a challenge. Speaking of challenges, next one is a date. So let's do a little research here on checking for dates. And this is a little more complicated because remember when we first started learning about dates, we discovered if the user types their dates in ISO format, we get this Greenwich Mean Time stuff, which could put us off by as much as 4 or 5 hours. And occasionally, when we're just messing with dates, be off by an entire day. So we have to be careful here. And I also discovered by looking in my isDate function, or yeah, isDate. Oops. In the documentation in here, did I get the right one? Nope. The documentation in here says if the user enters a date in these formats, is it acceptable? Now the alignment got all goofy on me here, but we can still see that there's still some no's. If the user types 11/15/2011, Opera doesn't recognize it. Weird. The user types 2011-1-1, single digits. None of them except Chrome recognize it. And again, I haven't updated. Notice that's a bit dated, right? I haven't updated to see if it's changed. Bottom line is it doesn't matter. But if we put slashes in with single digits, then it does recognize it. And so I'm using that little chart as part of my validation plan. It looks like the browsers are not real happy with dashes sometimes. Here's a couple more, right? Firefox does not like that format for a date. It's the dashes. If you get the same date put in with slashes, then everything's cool. And so what I'm going to do in my date validation is replace any dashes and dots. Europeans like to put dots in their dates, and you'll see that in a lot of websites. JavaScript doesn't like them at all. The date function does not convert the dots, doesn't like them. So I'm going to go through behind the scenes and take out any dashes and any dots and replace them with slashes. That way the user can type the data however the heck they want, and as it turns out, I reformat it anyways. So let's take a look at how I tackle that. We already learned that this ISO format gets a little weird, so we're not going to, we don't compare dates. That's the other thing. Remember, our date pickers return text. And the good news is if we turn that text into ISO format, that works very well as a string comparing less than, greater than, because it works. Because it's got the year, the month, the day. So any date in ISO format, even if it's a string that's previous, will be less than a later date using strings, as long as they're in this format. If you flip it around and put it in the 1115, then things get really bad. So what we're going to do behind the scenes is get everything into ISO format as strings and then compare them. Somebody did that. Was it in Swift? Did you did that, Justin, or were you doing that in?
We're gonna do it, and then we figure out how to make a date class work.
Oh, okay. You got the date class to do less than and greater than? Greater than today type of stuff?
No, because we returned them as NS dates.
Oh, okay. So we're going to turn everything into strings, everything formatted like that, ultimately. We're going to import the date that's entered by the user. If the format is not YYMMDD, if they didn't enter it in that format, I'm going to reformat it as a string into that format. And then take out, actually this should be done before, I thought I moved that up. Take out the dashes and the slashes. Okay, let's code it. I think reading it harder than seeing it in code. So now I need another handler here. I already have the DTP pointer defined, so PTR date dot onBlur equals validate to the date. And being extra anal, that'll go in here. Skip the comments this time. And now start stealing code. I think it's just called DTP date. DTP value and ERR DTP. Okay, bad names. That's because they're generic. DTP value and ERR DTP. Hide the error marker. And if we find a problem, we display it. And this one, in my solution, I have it the other way around, where I show the error marker, and in the one circumstance where I don't need it, I hide it. I think I'm going to stick with this to start with. First thing I want to know is it still blank? If the ptr.value is equal to the empty string, not equal to the empty string, if it's blank, we'll let it go. Or, at this point, display the appropriate error message saying, hey, you can't leave it blank. You understand what I mean there? I'm just not coding it. If it's not blank, that means there's something there, and the first thing I want to do is remove the dashes and dots and replace them with slashes. Because regardless of the format that the user types them in, if there's slashes in there, it'll translate. I believe in my notes I have some code. It's going to, bless you, there it is. First of all, I want to replace, if it's not equal to the empty string, I want to do a replace. That's a regular expression. You can do you can use regular expressions not only for comparing, but for a search and replace. So let me show you what I got there so it's a little larger. I'm going to create a variable called the entered date, just like my entered value up above. That's going to be equal to my ptr.value with all of the dashes and dots replaced. best way to do that, and particularly since I want a global replace, I want all the dashes and all the dots replaced, is using a regular expression. In JavaScript, regular expressions are surrounded by slashes. That's it. Just a slash. No quotes around the slash, none of that other kind of stuff. You could put the, caret to start with at the beginning, but in this case I don't need it. Here's the first thing that's in there. What's with the backslash? The square brackets here mean pick one, any one of these. Okay. A dash, a backslash, or a dot. No, that's not what it says. It says dash or a dot. Remember from the last regular expression we did a couple days ago, a dot represents any character. And so by putting a backslash in front of it, what we're saying is remove the special significance of this dot and just give me a dot.
So it's an escape character.
It's the escape character, just like it is in most languages. It's not an N, it's a backslash N, it's an escape character. It's not a backslash, it's a backslash backslash, so it's really a backslash. That's what that means. And that's any number, okay? And I want all of them. To get all of them in a search and replace, you add a G for global. So this says search for any dash or period and give me all of them. When you find them, replace them with a slash. I believe that's what I have up here. Yep. So that's another example of a regular expression. Again, the next unit, 11, is all about regular expressions, so you get to delve into it a little bit deeper. But the square brackets means pick one. The backslash is the escape character that said that's not a dot that means every character, that's a dot, period. Just done. G means global. So at this point, now whatever the users entered, all of the dashes and dots have been removed, and slashes and entered dates now contains the string version of my date. The next thing I want to know is it a date? In my utilities is a function called isDate. That's what we were looking at just a minute ago, right here. And it's really a short function. There's more comments here than there is function. The function just says convert it using this string and make it a date. If this fails, it either returns not a number or invalid date. Not a number meaning it doesn't even look like a date. Invalid date meaning it's out of range for some reason. So that's the way dates can be bad. Now I don't have to remember that anymore. I just say isDate. So going back to our code, we can say if isDate of my entered value. If it is a date, I'm going to keep processing. Otherwise, I display messages saying that's not a date.
You want to change that to entered value date?
Yeah, thank you. IntelliSense helping me again. So if it's not a date, then we yell at them. Otherwise, it is a date. That's good. But I might also now, I need to do a range check. Is it in the future? Is it in the past? Up here at the top, we set a min and max date, and I'm not sure I particularly like them, so let's tweak this a little bit to make it 13 a year ago. So somewhere within the last year or so. Notice the mins and the max, the constants have already been defined up there in window on load again. If I now want to do a comparison of the dates, is it in range? The way I do that is convert them to ISO format. What you don't want to do is convert an ISO date into an ISO date. Doesn't work, because that's where it can use the Greenwich Mean Time stuff and lose 6 hours or 5 hours for us. So the first thing I'm going to say is this date already in ISO format? If it's already in ISO format, then leave it alone. I need an ISO format. Here's a regular expression for ISO format. So up here under my variables is where I'm going to put that. And I'm going to call this format for ISO. Call it whatever you want. Format for ISO, and it's going to be equal to another regular expression. I'm not allowing any other characters. So I put the caret and the $sign in there, and everything goes in between. The caret represents the beginning of the string. The $sign represents the end of the string. In between here,
Sorry.
it's all right. In between here, I now want to describe what an ISO date looks like. It's 4 digits. Okay, so I can do gotta remember how to do this. I'll just cheat and look. \D. \D is a special code for digits, lowercase d. And then there's a multiplier, curly brackets 4. So up here, inside there's a \D digits, curly brackets 4. That's a multiplier. That says there must be 4 digits at the beginning of the string. Now notice this doesn't say it has to start with a 2. I've seen other formats that check to make sure it starts with a 2 or a 1. But then things get complicated. If you're trying to range check at the same time, I wouldn't do that. I just want to check to see if it's a date. Then what happens? Then there's a dash, and then there's 2 more digits, and another dash, and 2 more digits.
Why dash?
What?
How come dashes? I thought we put in.
No, ISO format has dashes. We took the slashes out. We took, oh, wait a minute, wait.
I thought you put slashes in.
Uh-oh. So it never will be, will it? It can't be in that format. Whoa. Never occurred to me before. Because we replaced here, it can't have any dashes in it, can it? Because we're looking at the entered date here. So that if statement's useless. Never occurred to me before.
So check for slashes instead.
Don't need to. If there's slashes in there, I can convert it. The only reason I'm asking this question is because sending an ISO date to isDate to convert it, an ISO string to isDate to convert it, messes with Greenwich Mean Time. But it can't be. Because this command right here said take out the dashes. There won't be any dashes. This if statement is never true. This never happens, or always happens, excuse me, always happens. So now that we've done this lovely bit of,
We still have to make sure that they didn't do it in like 10/12/2014, don't we? Because it's just sending the string.
but the only thing I'm worried about with this if statement, understand me,
Okay.
is pure ISO format. That's why this if statement is here. This if statement right here, if it matches the pattern is what that says. I hate to remove this because it's a great example of how to use regular expressions in JavaScript, but I guess we're going to get that in the next unit anyways. Here's my pattern, and this says, does this entered date match that pattern? It cannot match that pattern. It's impossible because, like you said, why dashes? There can't be any. This command right here removed my dashes, period. They're gone. So I don't have to worry about it.
So do we remove the dashes before we turn it into an ISO date?
Yes. And now what I'm going to do is turn it into an ISO date. Okay, I'm going to say, if the thing that we entered is a date, then format it for ISO. Entered date is equal to whatever it was before, converted to a date. And that's not going to cause any trouble because there's always slashes in it, and the slashes all convert properly. We don't lose any hours when we do this. They all convert properly. And then it's a date. I can format it because I have my date format. Include file for an ISO date. In my notes, I did it with YYMMDD. Okay, but if I remember right, in that class, there was an ISO date predefined format. Date format. ISO date. Predefined. And in my opinion, at least, a whole lot easier to understand here.
Do you have to use date format?
No, I don't think so, because this is one of those prototypes where at the bottom, it turns it into a prototype dot format.
Okay.
Okay, so this has been attached. This is a new prototype, a new protocol, if you will, for the date class in JavaScript, saying you now know how to format stuff. Here's the simple definition, but it calls this complicated function to figure it out. So we should be able to use ISO date format, just like that. Now that it's in the right format, now I can start doing comparisons. If the entered date is less than the PTR min. PTR is my date picker. It has a minimum value. Or the entered date is greater than PTR.max. If that's the case, turn on error markers and display messages. I forgot to turn on my error marker on this one. Else, there will be an else, so I'm going to put it in there before I forget. But in this case, if it's less than, it's out of range. So we display the error marker and a title. I could concatenate the PTR dot min. That's a string. What the heck? That's all part of my error message. Date is out of range. Instead of a period, let's put a colon space, and then I display the range date. That's going to be confusing because they're ISO dates, so let's put the word 2 in there. So this, one more time, this if statement, is it blank? Maybe we yell at them, maybe we don't. If it's not blank, then is it a date? If it's not a date, tell them I don't recognize it. Otherwise, it must be a date. So then we format them all the same so that we can do date comparison. And if it passes that one, don't have to do this because it's already hidden at the top up here. But I might want to say ptr.value equals the entered date, which at this point is reformatted to ISO. So we take whatever the user enters and reformat it for them. That's optional. Could leave their entry alone. We recognized it, so leave it. The downside to leaving it is it'll get saved that way if we're not careful. But that's minimal because the PHP on the other side, when we're saving it into the database, should be converting it into a date again anyways. It's coming as a string. Harold?
Can you, now, are you going to comment how the barn format ISO? That regular expression?
This one here? No.
Hold up in your variables.
Hmm?
Hold up in your variables.
Oh, can I? Yeah, I don't need it. You're right. Doesn't hurt anything because I'm not using it, but I don't need it. It's a regular expression. And we'll save the regular expression discussion deeper for the next unit. Let's make sure this works. Better switch to the console because I did a lot of stuff. Pretty good chance I'm missing a parenthesis somewhere. Never heard of PTR date. Validate date. Okay, capital V then, be that way. Okay, so now I can go to the date. I can leave it blank, nothing happens because I didn't write any code for that. Could have said just as well that you must enter this date. And then we can put Voker in there and it says, no, that's not a date. And so it recognizes non-dates. What happens if I put in a 3/1? So that's not a date that I recognize. This is interesting. Date.format is not a function. Enter date equals date of enter date dot format. Did I copy that wrong? New date. Too much Swift. Always got an excuse now. I got 6 languages going through my head. Now what's your problem? That's out of range, and there's my range, 13, so that's 3/1/14. Why does it think that's out of range? Should be legal, right? Oh,
Because you don't have zero.
no, the reason it's not, and what I was trying to show you, is that if you don't put a year on here, you get 1900. Unlike the Microsoft products, where anything less than 30 gets converted to 2000, in JavaScript, if you don't put a year on it, at least this version of JavaScript, you get 1900. So what it's telling me is that's March 1st, 1914, and that is out of range. Okay, but we don't see that. So there's another piece of validation that you could do. If it's a 2-digit year, then why don't we add our own 2000 to it, or add your own logic to it? Could. Or they'll go, what? I mean 3/1/2014. What's wrong? Oh, nothing. Now I didn't reformat it, right? If it's wrong. Maybe I reformat it sooner. Right? Here I calculated the ISO date format. Maybe I take my reformatting command, this one, and put it up here. So that it reformats their date so they can see that. Now my else statement is empty.
I'll just try 14.
And they go, what? Oh, geez, stupid. It took 3/1/2014. Go away. I pressed enter. That's why I did that. So that's an option to reformat it for them right away. Particularly if there's a 2-digit year, and maybe you could ask that question, is there a 2-digit year? If it is, show it to them right away. All kinds of things you can do here if they make you crazy.
Is that a,
Let's go to the high end. Hang on a second. 12/1/2014. That's out of range. And 13/11/1, is that what I got there? Yep. So 10/31/2014, 13. Still out of range. And the type here, by the way, is date. Right, this field type I never changed. Okay, so this is a date type. But this is a Firefox date type. The next question is, what does it do in Chrome?
you get a date picker, you can't do anything but put MMDD and the 4-digit year.
It won't let you, right?
You can't manually type anything. Well, I mean,
That's,
you can
isn't
type
it Opera where you can't type, but in Chrome you can?
Yeah, you can type it, but it has to be in that format. It doesn't let you type any format.
Hope this launches so we can see that. I understand what you're describing, but I want to see it. So you're telling me the date picker, if I type in a 10/31/1997, it won't take it.
Then it might, but it won't take,
Here's the enter date, and there's the format that it wants.
it won't take any other format but that.
It won't take, I can't type any other format than that. And because there's a min and a max, I can't click them. So my validation on this is not getting in the way. It's just not helping any.
But you can type it.
But I can't type it. Right? And if I'm the user and that makes me mad, what do?
Tell
Programmer.
them to use a different browser.
Tell me. Nah, it's easier than that.
Make it text field.
Turn it back into a text field. Because that's what it is in Firefox anyways, is a text field. That's what we wrote the code for, is a text field. If they don't like the fact that they can't type NOV 11/2015, if they don't like it, then turn it back into a text field.
Change your format. I think you can change
Yeah, but then they have to type it in that format. Dang users, from week to week, they change the way they want to type their dates. But the good news for us here is that there's no conflict. I can't type junk in there, so that error message never comes up. But we at least know that Firefox and Explorer have not yet implemented a date picker at all. Neither is Safari. Have not implemented a date picker at all, so if it's a text box, we will validate their stuff. So that works out pretty good. And in Opera, you can't even type. You have to pick from a list. So at least here I can type. And I can type a 1 and a oh, look. Chrome let me type a date that was out of range, even though there's a min and a max, and it knows it let me type one. It's a good thing we got error markers going, hey, that's out of range. So these error markers, even though they're a little old school, still have some value. And again, I like them because they're very unobtrusive.
They use them in Sentry. They don't code them on the form. They insert them into the form if they're needed.
Insert the error icons. It's another thing you can do. I just write JavaScript to do adding of HTML to stuff that isn't even there. Seems a bit more complicated than just throwing them on there, having them hidden, and then turning them on when you need them, but that's my opinion.
They have all custom controls all written up, so the control has the code already written to add the icon.
Icon, yeah.
We have room for it.
Yep.
Space set aside.
Well, very good.
That's in the intermediate web programming class in your 7th semester. All right, I'm going to stop there let's stop there. When we come back next time, we'll start talking about key press, if I remember right. Yep. So we can learn to intercept keys. Be interesting to see what that does to my date pickers, if anything. What it does to my numeric up-downs. I'm pretty sure for numerics, it's great because now they can't type text in there that we were ignoring anyways. So our validation, again, our JavaScript validation might change for the number field because if we put key press in, they can't type garbage and we don't have to worry about it. It's just you can't leave it blank if that's part of the validation. So we'll see how to do that. Relatively straightforward. Once again, I have given you all the key press events, all the event handlers. All we got to do is tie into them. And we'll talk a little bit about formatting numbers. We should be able to finish this up on Monday. And then give you a little more time. This one is a pretty lengthy typing assignment. Give you time for you to work on that and for me to get my act together for the next unit. Or write some Swift.